Hello and welcome to Comprehensive News Analysis by BYJU'S IAS. The first article that we have for you today is about the Supreme Court ordered Pegasus inquiry. The author here says that the Pegasus inquiry ordered by the Supreme Court must be supported by the government because the government's silence on this entire issue has raised a lot of questions, and this is the time to come out clean and explain its stand on the right to privacy. This article talks to us about the importance of right to privacy, about the role played by the government, and also why the government should make efforts to preserve it as much as possible. I'm sure all of you would be aware of the Pegasus issue. Pegasus is a software sold by the NSO Group of Israel and came to light in May 2019 when there were news stories that suggested that Pegasus software is being used to infiltrate into WhatsApp chats of people around the world. In 2019 November, India's law minister also acknowledged the fact that Pegasus is being used. However, it became all the more controversial in July 2021 when a group of 17 media organizations published a report having the names of thousands of people across the world who have been targeted using this software. Interestingly, this list included 300 Indians as well, amongst whom were many journalists, doctors, political people, and even some people who worked in the higher judiciary of India as well. When asked about the government's intention to snoop people who do not have any criminal record, the people who are not a threat to national security, government has not given its explanation. The government keeps on saying that all these things are being done to keep national security above any threat. Now, the fact is that the NSO Group of Israel has continuously said that it only sells the softwares to governments, meaning that if Indians are being spied upon using this software, it has to be done through the government only. Not just India, many governments across the world have actually bought this software, including the UK, the US, and many other European nations. Let's first discuss about the significance of privacy. Scandals such as the Pegasus issue, where the government is spying on people without their permission, could have had a much more disastrous impact in other countries. For example, in the US, in 1970s, when the Watergate scandal broke out, the US president had to resign. The scandal was that Richard Nixon, who was the US president at that time, had actually used the government machinery and government officials to spy on people from the opposite party. That is, Richard Nixon was a Republican, so he was spying on the Democratic Party, its meetings, etc. And when the inquiry was held, he was misusing his powers so that the inquiry could be diverted to the wrong direction. With this scandal, Richard Nixon became the first and the only US president to resign from his office. Now imagine something like that happening in India. In India, when the Pegasus issue came out, the government, instead of clarifying, has thus remained silent on this issue without offering any clarification about how and why did they choose some people to snoop. There have been multiple RTIs filed, PILs filed in the court. The opposition has tried to have parliamentary debate, but none of them has actually given any result to the people. Now, because some people of the judiciary were also being spied, that is why the court took the matter in its own hands and made a 3-member committee to look into this issue. This 3-member committee will be overseen by a retired judge of the court itself. Interestingly, the government of India said in the Supreme Court that they would set up their own inquiry committee, but the Supreme Court said that this is not a joke. You are the accused, so you can't set up your own committee. It goes against the principle of natural justice. So let us set up a committee that will inquire into this matter. The committee that the court has set up has been asked to give recommendations on these 7 matters. That is, regarding the enactment or amendment of the law so that these things don't happen again, regarding how to enhance the cyber security in the country, how to prevent invasion of right to privacy, how to establish a mechanism whenever such a suspicion arises of illegal surveillance, setting up an independent agency to investigate into these issues, any other arrangement that are required to protect citizens' rights, and on any other matter that the committee may seem fit. Now, from the government side also, government has reiterated time and again that for them, cyber security and the privacy of people in India is their topmost concern. While the government has not acknowledged the fact that they are the ones who are snooping on the citizens right now, there are some efforts made by the government if Indians are spied upon online by someone else. These are the steps taken by the government. That is, Cyber Surakshat Bharat initiative, under which the government plans to raise awareness amongst the people about how to be safe online. The National Cyber Security Coordination Center that will look into such attacks. The Cyber Swachhta Kendra, under which people will be told about how to keep their computers and other mobile devices safe from viruses. The Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center that will look into instances of cybercrime. CERT in team that is responsible for ensuring that an appropriate response is given to any such threat towards the government of India. Internationally also, there are a couple of initiatives that you must be aware of. Number one, the International Telecommunication Union, which works under the UN, and the Budapest Convention on Cyber Crimes, where the nations came together to tackle this issue. Interestingly, India is not a signatory here. Now, it is also important to understand a bit about the right to privacy debate. The unfortunate fact is, in India, as common citizens, we don't really value a right to privacy too much. For example, if I told you that your Facebook profile is open, or your photos can be seen by strangers also on Facebook or Instagram, you would not really worry about it too much. And that is not because we are not educated enough. See, depending upon the kind of country you live in, your problems are supposed to be different. Our problems cannot be the same as the problems of developed nations. In developed nations, the right to privacy is a much bigger issue as compared to that in India. In India or in other developing countries, we are still fighting on much smaller issues such as social equality, such as the right to work, such as not enough jobs, such as good education. So, for us, if you look at the preference of topics where we have to fight and we have to be concerned about, right to privacy unfortunately is very far away. For example, while the US is fighting about gender pay gap, that is, male and female should be paid equally for the same work, India is still fighting about giving the women the right to work. So our issues and our problems are not the same as the first world issues. And that is why even when we had this Pegasus issue, it did not become such a big deal in the country as it did in the US, because for us, even if the government is spying on us, we are ready to accept that as long as we think that it is in line with government's objective of keeping the country secure. However, there are multiple international documents and conventions that talk about right to privacy. For example, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, and also the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights of 1976 describe right to privacy as an essential part of human rights. The Supreme Court of India also has reiterated the fact that right to privacy is a part of fundamental rights under Article 21. So things are changing in the past few years, while right to privacy is given more importance by the judiciary also. The Supreme Court also has said that if the government wants to spy on people, it would only be allowed under specific circumstances. For example, if it is done as per the law. Second, it must be necessary and it should be the only option available. Third, it should be done only as much as needed. For example, if you are spying on a person because you want to know where does he go in the evening because you are suspicious about his activities, doesn't mean that you will spy on the person's wife also, the person's daughter also, and the son also. Spying or snooping should only be done as much as needed. And also, it must promote an interest of the state. Other countries in the world, mostly the first world nations, have made a lot of guidelines about data protection, about their right to privacy. In the US, for example, in 1974, just after the Watergate scandal, data protection became a legal right. Similarly, in UK and other parts of EU, most of the nations have passed laws about data protection, while India is still far off. The second article that we have today focuses on the government's decision to extend the tenures of the heads of CBI and Enforcement Directorate. So the story is, recently the President of India promulgated an ordinance under which the heads of CBI and Enforcement Directorate, who right now have a 2 year tenure, their tenure can be extended till 5 years, 1 year at a time. So, for example, when their 2 year term is over, government will see if they worked well and government wants to continue, then they will extend their tenure by 1 year. So after third year is over, again the government will see if the tenure was good, they will extend again for 1 year. Then again, if the services are good, they will extend to 1 year. So total 5 years of tenure can be given if the government feels that they are doing a good job. Now, there are two aspects to this decision. Number one, it is always argued that people at the top position should be given a slightly longer tenure to make a difference. Arbitrary and frequent transfers, very short tenures, do not help in productivity. In fact, the Supreme Court also in 1997, in the famous Vineet Narayan case, said that at least 2 years of tenure should be given to the director of CBI and the director of Enforcement Directorate. Now, till that is fine. The problem with this decision is number one, the 5 year tenure that we are talking about here is not an automatic 5 year tenure. After the 2 years are over, the government will see if your service is likable or not. Now, you all are intelligent people. You understand that if a certain political party is in power and they have to decide whether or not to extend the tenure of the head of CBI or ED, what would they see? They would see, did the person work in our favor or not? Was a person helpful for our gains or not? So this gives a kind of a free hand and arbitrary hand to the government. On the other hand, for the CBI and ED directors, it gives them an indication that if you want to stay longer at your job, you have to be in favor of the government. You have to work accordingly so that the government sees you as an asset and the government keeps on extending your tenure. That is what the controversy is. Second part of the controversy is because of the current Chief of Enforcement Directorate, the IRS officer S.K. Mishra. So S.K. Mishra became the Chief of Enforcement Directorate in 2018, and the position usually has a 2 year term. So his term of 2 years got over in November 2020. In November 2020, government extended it by 1 more year, giving a special order. So he was supposed to retire in November 2021. That is 17th of November 2021. The government is said to be in his favor. The government is said to be pretty happy with the services that he has provided. And that is why the government, rather than waiting for the parliament's session to begin, went to the President of India and promulgated the ordinance in such an urgency so that his tenure does not get over and he gets an extension. So government's hurried decision to bring this ordinance is seen only to favor Mr. S.K. Mishra, who is the current ED head and whose decisions as the head of this agency seem to be in favor of the current government. Now understand this, whatever we have discussed till now are only allegations. These are just points of views of people who are against the government, who want to criticize the government, saying that the government has done this to extend the tenure of Mr. Mishra. The government, however, has not said that we have done this specifically for this officer or specifically so that these people remain faithful to the government during their tenure. So for us as a UPSC aspirant, apart from understanding this situation, it is also relevant for us to understand something about the Enforcement Directorate or ED. I'm sure in the past few years you would have heard a lot about ED, the ED raids or ED filing cases against important people in the country. So it's important to understand what is ED and what does it do. ED stands for Enforcement Directorate, and it came into being in 1956 when it was called the Enforcement Unit. It was first established under the Department of Economic Affairs. Later on, it was transferred to the Department of Revenue for administration in 1960. Even today, the ED works under the same department, that is the Department of Revenue for administration. It is headed by an IRS officer, the Indian Revenue Service officer. It works as the government's main economic intelligence agency, responsible for enforcing economic laws and fighting economic crime in the country. Its major responsibility is to enforce two laws. One, FEMA, which stands for the Foreign Exchange Management Act, and other PMLA, which stands for Prevention of Money Laundering Act. While FEMA is a civil law specifically looking into the misuse of foreign exchange in the country, PMLA is a criminal law which gives the power to ED to attach or confiscate assets that have been derived from listed offenses under this particular act. Thus, as you can see, an extremely powerful organization which the government utilizes to catch hold of people indulging in economic offenses. The third article that we have today is about the role of the European Union in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, there is nothing that happened with respect to EU and Indo-Pacific yesterday or in the past week for this article to come up. This is actually based on European Union's decision to unveil their strategy for Indo-Pacific. It's a pretty interesting article about what European Union is trying to do to solidify its position in the Indo-Pacific region, and where does India stand into this equation. Now, this policy document, which the EU released on 16th of September, said that EU will focus on sustainable and inclusive prosperity, green transition, ocean governance, digital governance, and partnerships, etc. Now, before we go deeper into EU, its role in the Indo-Pacific and its equation with India, there are a few things that you have to understand about EU and its requirements right now. It is one of the most developed areas in the world, but EU has its own set of problems. For example, it is suffering from the issues of aging population. If you remember when the coronavirus crisis started, most of the deaths were seen in Italy. Now, while Italy is said to have the most advanced healthcare system in the world, the reason why it saw a lot of deaths was because the average age of Italian population is close to 46 years. That is why a lot of old age people were falling ill and dying because of the coronavirus crisis. Second, EU as a whole does not have a large population. Because of smaller population, it means that the goods that they produce have to be sold outside the continent, specifically in areas such as Indo-Pacific, Asia, where the population of people is much higher, and the spending capacity also of the people in Indo-Pacific, including India, is increasing day by day. The average income of an Indian today is much higher as compared to what it was a couple of decades back. So, Indo-Pacific countries give a great opportunity for European Union, number one, to fill in the shortage of human resources, and secondly, to act as a market where they can sell their produce, which are usually expensive but are becoming more affordable with increasing purchasing power capacity of people living in the Indo-Pacific. So with this in mind, what exactly is it that the EU is trying to do? EU is trying to focus on the Indo-Pacific with giving a miss to China. Now, why are they giving a miss to China? This is also something that you need to understand. Interestingly, EU is one of those groups that has been very strict on its stand on human rights issues. For example, the US has been accused multiple times that they talk a lot about human rights, but they still have great relationships with countries such as Saudi Arabia, such as Israel, which don't have a great human rights record. EU, on the other hand, is very strict on its human rights policy. Even when they are signing trade agreement with any other country, they only sign those agreements when they are extremely satisfied with the human rights record and the working of the government in that country. In fact, till today, EU has not signed a free trade agreement with India because of many of these reasons only, which have nothing to do with trade. In that aspect, EU does not want to come very close to China because China's human rights record has always been in question, number one. Secondly, EU's relationship with Russia also is pretty dicey, and in the past decade, Russia has also been coming very close to China. These are some of the reasons why EU is looking for a different partner in the Indo-Pacific region, and this is where India comes into the picture. Also, unlike the US or Japan, EU cannot play a very active military role in the Indo-Pacific, mainly because their military might is not comparable to that of US or China. Amongst the EU nations, France can be said to be the most militarily advanced nation, But France also has its own set of differences ever since AUKUS came into being. That is, Australia, UK, and US making a group, which angered France. For those of you who did not know, the story is that Australia was supposed to buy some submarines from France, but at the last minute of the negotiations, they ditched France and rather bought those submarines from the US, leading to France becoming extremely angry at Australia and at the US also. Now, this gives a chance for India to step up and forge better ties with these nations, specifically with France, UK, and Germany. India and EU has always had great numbers in trade. EU is India's third largest trading partner with about 62.8 billion euros worth of trade in 2020. Over here, you must also understand the fact that EU China trade is much higher. For example, as per the official numbers, the EU China trade is over 1 billion euros per day, translating to over 365 billion in 1 year. So India has a long way to catch up, but still the signs that we see are positive. The next article is on the unfortunate pollution situation that Delhi and other parts of North India are facing. This is an unfortunate annual event that keeps on occurring every November. Whenever November hits, Delhi and surrounding parts are covered with smog. We see the governments running around, the Delhi government, the center government, people calling for ban on vehicles, people calling on ban of stubble burning, people calling about ban on the Diwali crackers. But as soon as mid December or end of December comes in, we all forget about it. For many years now, the central government has been saying that stubble burning is the key problem behind the smog. So, yesterday in the Supreme Court, when the official numbers were released, it was found out that the farm fires in Punjab, Haryana, and UP only make up 10% of Delhi's pollution problem, thus leading to the Supreme Court becoming extremely angry and asking the center government, why are you blaming the poor farmers for everything when your own report says that the farm fires only make up 10% of the problem of Delhi pollution? Now, this article in itself does not give you a solution to the Delhi pollution problem. So instead of going into this article, what I have done is I have taken out some important information from an extremely credible report about Delhi's pollution. This report is released by two scientists of IIT Kanpur, and the report's name is Comprehensive Study on Air Pollution and Greenhouse Gases in Delhi. It's a long report, but I will just show you the most important parts of this report. The first important part of the report is what exactly are the sources of pollution? Because when we talk about ideas such as banning vehicles, even and odd, or installing smog towers, or banning construction activities, it is important to understand what exactly are the sources of pollution. The interesting part is this report tells us that most of the PM 2.5 particles and the PM 10 particles are actually because of road dust. Now, just think to yourself, has any politician ever talked about controlling road dust? No. They talk about controlling the burning of coal, they talk about controlling vehicle activity, they talk about controlling farm fires or crackers, but they never talk about controlling what is the biggest component of pollution, that is road dust. Now, the Delhi government a few years back said that in order to control pollution, we will be buying some sweeping trucks. If you live in Delhi or if you have been to Delhi, you might have seen there are huge trucks. They go on the road very slowly, and at the bottom of the truck, if these are the wheels of the truck, between the wheels there are some vacuum cleaner kind of things. So they go on the road and they try to suck in all the dust particles from the road to control this particular part of the pollution. Now, what did the Supreme Court say? The Supreme Court said that despite all the promises, the Delhi government only has 69 mechanized road sweepers to cover the streets of the entire capital. Just 69. When you clearly know that dust from the road is the biggest component of this pollution. This report of IIT Kanpur also talked about the road map using which we can control the pollution problem in India. Now, this is very important for you. This report also tells you that by what measure can the AQI be reduced by what number. For example, the report says that if we stop the use of coal in hotels and restaurants in Delhi, it will bring down AQI by 80.56 points. It says that if all the domestic cooking is done by LPG, it will bring down AQI by 50 points. MSW means municipal solid waste. So the waste that is collected from the household by municipality, a lot of that is also burnt. If we stop this burning of this waste, it can reduce AQI by 100 points. It talks about other measures also, about vehicles, about the control of road dust. Just see the road dust point, which is extremely interesting. The report says that if vacuum sweeping of major roads is done only 4 times in a month, not every day, not once in 2 days, only 4 times in a month, and mechanical sweeping of water wash, carpeting of the shoulders, all of that can reduce AQI by 70 points. Not just this, I also want you to focus here on point number 4, which is extremely interesting. The report says that when construction activities are going on and when there is a lot of sand and concrete and cement that is lying in large numbers, if we just cover it up, nothing very scientific, nothing that requires a lot of expense, if we just cover it up with a sheet, even that will play a major role in controlling pollution. Spraying water, ensuring there are windbreakers so that the particles don't fly far away, all of that can reduce air pollution. So if you can see, all of these measures suggested can be easily achieved only and only if the government has the will to do that. The report also talks about banning biomass burning, making sure that power plants within 300-kilometer range of Delhi are not emitting sulfur and nitrogen oxides. The next article that we have is on a pretty interesting and some would say dangerous topic, that is about bats. Ever since coronavirus and other diseases such as the Nipah virus have become a part of our life, we have been reading a lot about bats and their impact on human life. While most of the things that we have been reading are negative in nature, the authors are trying to highlight the positive role that the bats play in human life. They start by giving a lot of facts, such as bats help by eating insects in the night time. In the farms, they eat a lot of disease causing mosquitoes. In fact, they also spread the seeds of very important fruits such as the bananas, guavas, cashews, mangoes, etc. In fact, there was a study conducted in Thailand that found out that because of bats and the insects that they ate, it led to a saving of over $1 million. Not just this, the bat droppings are also great fertilizers since they are pretty rich in nitrogen and phosphorus. Having said that, we cannot ignore the fact that bats are natural reservoirs to many viruses that have caused diseases such as Nipah, Hendra, Ebola, and even the coronavirus. Now, the interesting fact is, despite being the host of so many viruses, bats themselves don't fall ill. That is because they have developed such an immune system that helps them fight these viruses and even helps them in aging at a very slow pace. That is why bats usually have a very long lifetime as compared to the other mammals. Now, why is it that in the past decade or so, a lot of diseases originating from bats have been seen in humans? The very obvious reason for this is expansion of human activities into natural habitats of bats and other animals. With increasing population and increasing construction, we are trying to build infrastructure at as many places as possible. A lot of caves, which used to be natural habitats of bats, are being overtaken by humans. That is why there is an increased interaction between humans and animals, not just humans and bats. You see, it has become quite a common news that leopards or tigers are coming into cities, that snakes are found at places where people are living. So all of that is happening because humans are now going into the areas where animals were supposed to live. There is also a very interesting case study of Bomar clan in Nagaland. The authors say that Bomar clan in Nagaland have a tradition in which they gather at a place called Mimi and they send a lot of smoke into the caves of bats. When the bats start coming out, they kill the bats and they consume them. Although they have very close interaction with the bats, Some of the bats even bite them in their defense. But people from these clans have not seen any bat related diseases. And that also is a matter of scientific research which is still going on. Multiple studies are now trying to ascertain what all viruses are seen inside the bats so that we can be prepared for them in advance. Now, before we finish this, let me tell you a very interesting story about the bird sparrow and China. Hopefully, you will learn something from this. So, the story goes back to 1958. In the 1950s, Mao Zedong announced that he wants to take the Chinese country forward and make it a world leader. A lot of drastic steps were taken, including banning any private farming. So the lands of everyone were combined and everyone together had to work in the farmlands so that the production of grains and all other foods should increase. Mao Zedong at that time asked his advisors about what can be done to increase and maximize the production of food grains in China. One of the advice that was given to Mao Zedong was that the sparrow bird, the harmless sparrow bird, eats a lot of food grains. So, in order to maximize our production, we should kill these sparrow birds. Mao Zedong, without having any second thought, in 1958 started a campaign called Smash Sparrow. Now, under this Smash Sparrow campaign, people were told to kill sparrows whenever they see it, leading to the killing of lakhs of these sparrows. Now, what happened next? Very soon, China found out that the sparrow birds don't just eat food grains, they eat a lot of insects as well. The insects that would actually harm the food grains much more. Now that there were no sparrows in China, these insects were free. And these insects in millions and millions of numbers started attacking the food grains in China. So much so that there was such a shortage of food grains in China that it led to the worst Chinese famine in its entire history, with millions of people dying because they just did not have enough food to eat because of locust attack, because the insects were just eating all the food grains available. In fact, there have been many documentaries that have stated that in that time, in the 1960s in China, there was so much shortage of food grains that people started killing and eating each other. Parents ate their kids and kids ate their own parents. Thousands of people murdered just for food. Why? Because there was just no food grains. Because the sparrows that used to kill the insects were nowhere to be found. As any other great leader, Mao Zedong also never accepted that he was responsible for it. So the government never apologized. But what they did was, realizing their mistake, they started buying sparrow birds from other countries such as USSR. Thousands and lakhs of sparrow birds were imported. They were set free, and almost after a decade, this problem started to come under control. But just see what one bad decision of the government can do. Official records say that almost 5 crore people died in China just because the Communist Party of China, led by Mao Zedong, ordered the killing of these sparrows. So let's not commit the same mistake, and let's not go on a campaign of killing and getting rid of all the bats. These are the articles that we wanted to discuss from today's Hindu newspaper. Now, a couple of practice questions. Number 1. There is an urgent need to strike a balance between right to privacy and national security. Do you agree with this statement? Suggest appropriate methods to achieve the same. Second, the problem of pollution in India won't be solved till we consider it as a seasonal problem. In the light of this statement, suggest measures to curb the pollution problem in India. Both of these have to be written in 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video.